Well, I love this idea that you guys have about sharing your stories, like sharing what God is doing throughout your week, and when you feel closest to God and when you feel most distant from God. And for the record, I feel closest to God when I'm binge watching Netflix. So that's just me. But we just finished Arrow season 3 last night. Whoa. We just finished it, so we're a little behind. And so I like hurried up and jumped on Amazon Prime, and I was like, "How much is it for season 4? We need to buy this like right away." So I don't know if that brings me closer to God or not, but if I can, I want to share something from a couple of weeks ago in my life where it was a great story of just being close to God. Some of you guys know this already. I was with a group that went out to Haiti a couple of weeks ago, and it was a great time. We had there's so many stories to share from that experience, but I want to share one of them with you guys today. Before I do that, though, I gotta say I was thinking about you guys while I was out there, and this is the view that I had every morning while I was out there. Every morning when I would wake up, which was all of about 2 mornings, right? Because it was a super quick trip, but I loved it. This was the view that I had every morning, and I loved it. But at nighttime, here's what it looked like. And it reminded me of you guys, right, when I saw these little specks of light in all the darkness. Because remember, last time I spoke to you guys, we talked about being the light of the world. And so I'm sitting out here on my balcony around midnight because I just wanted to soak in every minute of being in Haiti. And I was thinking about you guys, and I said, that's what it feels like to be the light of the world. Those little specks in a dark world. So just a reminder to you guys, you are God's light to the world. So, but this is a story that I want to share with you. It's a story of a conversation that I had with a guy named Rosamond. He is one of the village champions in Haiti, and he was also one of our translators on the trip. And everywhere we went, he was the person who guided us along with another guy named Frankie. And in this picture, actually, about 10 minutes or so after we took this picture, he and I were talking. He's like, "Hey, when you go back, tell people thank you so much." I don't know if you guys know this, but families from our church, from this church, gave in this Christmas offering 10 homes for families out there. And so we got to go to the villages where those homes are being built. We actually got to walk into the houses that were being built for these families, and it was a great experience. And he said, "Make sure you tell them thank you." So on behalf of him, thank you for everything as far as giving. I know it may not have been you, it may have been your parents, but thank you still. Now, we're looking over his village. His village is named Levesque, and this is the view on the other side of it. This is Levesque, and if you can imagine, these are all the houses that Mission of Hope, the organization that we're working with, has built for over 600 families. It's beautiful. It was amazing because on the other side of this picture, on the other side of this hill, people are living in tarps, trash, like barely anything. And actually, because they were living in tarps, people were becoming blinded because the exposure to the sun was messing with their skin and messing with their eyes. So can you imagine the relief of these 600 families that get to move into these permanent homes? It was a beautiful, beautiful sight to see, and I was just in awe of what God was doing there. But check out this section. It'll be highlighted in red for you. That section is actually an entire community of deaf people. You see, in Haiti, the deaf are completely shunned by their society. They're the others. And so this entire group was living by themselves, and as you guys know, there was the earthquake there, and they were all displaced from it. Well, the deaf community all stuck together because they're all the displaced, they're all the outcasts, so they stuck together. But these homes were specifically built for the deaf community. And I thought, man, this is amazing, amazing what God is doing. And then Rosamond told me, you see these little light poles? I don't know if you guys can see them or not. As we're walking through the village, it was such an eerie feeling because nobody was speaking. Everywhere else we went in Haiti, it was so loud, and people were talking, and kids would come up to us, but this part was quiet. Nobody spoke. There wasn't a word said the entire time because there was a deaf community. But I asked him, how come this village had light bulbs or had lamp posts, and they were solar-powered lamp posts, and the rest of them didn't? And he said to me that it was for safety. You see, for deaf people, they can't hear if somebody's breaking into their house. They can't hear if somebody next door is getting raped. And And so these lights are the only way to keep them safe, because they're senses, and they have people that are walking around guarding, and so the lights illuminate and keep them safe. And so I went from this mountaintop experience of, oh my gosh, this is so amazing what God is doing here, to just completely breaking my heart. It tore me up. But I was on a trip with quite a few other guys, so I started to get a little teary-eyed when he told me that. But I did the guy thing, like, whoa, did it get dusty over here all of a sudden? It was just that quick feeling of, I can't believe how amazing this is, to I can't believe how sad this is. And how quickly my world changed when he told me that. There's so many other stories that I'd love to tell you about, but I was so thankful for guys like Frankie and Rosamund, who were our translators the entire time that we were out there. If we didn't have them, I didn't know it. They speak Creole in Haiti, and the only words that I knew going into there was hello. Now I know good afternoon, hello, good afternoon, thank you, and how are you? And that's it. So could you imagine being in an entire country full of people and you can't speak to them whatsoever? How much do you rely on the person who can translate that for you, right? How much do you trust that person? Because who knows, I could be saying one thing and he could translate it a different way. As a matter of fact, one experience that I had, I got to pray for this person, and as I was praying, I would pray, and then I would have to pause so Frankie could translate it. And I would pray more and pause so Frankie could translate it. It was in that moment that I was like, God, I have to trust that this translation is happening correctly. Because if he's not, then it could change my world. It reminds me of a joke that I heard once. There was a Spanish thief who was going around New Mexico, and he was robbing all of the banks. And it was a small town, and the local deputy and sheriff are trying to catch him. They finally catch up to this guy. And the deputy can speak Spanish, but the sheriff can't. And the sheriff says, hey, you tell him, you translate this to him, that if he doesn't tell me where all the money that he's stolen is, I'm going to kill him. So the deputy says that, hey, this guy wants to know where all the money is. He's going to kill you. The thief says, oh my gosh, okay, fine, I'll tell you. It's about 3 blocks from here. It's at a garden, and it's there. You'll see a big tree. I buried it right there, and that's where all the money is. It's over $1 million. You guys can have it. I'm sorry, I should have never stolen it. Well, the sheriff says to the deputy, hey, what did he tell you? He said, you're going to have to kill me first before I tell you where the money is. You see how important it is to have a translator, because whether we're speaking in Spanish, whether we're speaking in Creole, whether we're speaking in English, every time we speak, every act that we do, every act of communication is an act of translation. Now, what I mean by that is whenever we use words, whether it's tweeting, whether it's Facebook, whether it's actually in person, as weird as that sounds, or texting, we're using these words to express or explain what we feel in our heart or thinking in our mind. We've all had these experiences, right, where it doesn't seem like what we're saying translates to the other person, and we're speaking a completely different language to somebody. I know I've had that experience where maybe it's a girl that I like, and I'm trying to tell her how I feel, namely my wife, right? But it doesn't come out the way I want it to. There's some sort of problem with the translation. What we run into with problems in translation is when it doesn't happen, it causes confusion. I mean, could you imagine, picture it this way. My heart is in English, but my words come out in Creole. I mean, how confusing would that be, right? Because not only is there a difference because, by the way, even the broken words in Creole that I do know, it sounds super awkward, and I get these looks like, I get what you're saying, but it sounds dumb, But there's that translation of confusion because your heart doesn't connect with your mind because it's not speaking the same language. And if another problem that we have is it can be damaging. How many times have you said one thing and and you intended it to mean something good or just something in general, but the impact of what you said was actually damaging to that person. Best scenario that I can think of is, how many of you guys have ever looked at somebody and said, "Whoa, you look tired today"? Yeah. That's like the worst thing you can say to somebody, because you're like, all you're saying is you're caring about their feelings. You're saying, "Oh my gosh, you look tired. Is everything okay? Did you get enough sleep last night?" Right? That's your intent of what you're saying. But how did they take that? What's wrong with my eyes, right? Like this is, so that translation happens and it can be damaging. But our words are our way of communicating what's in our heart and what's in our mind. And so because of that, I think it's absolutely important that we make that connection, because words are so powerful. The Bible says this in Proverbs 18:21. Death and life are in the power of tongue, and those who love it, its use, will eat its fruit. You see, I love the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is one of those great, down-to-earth, practical things. We can understand this verse right away. It doesn't take a bunch of exegetical work and background and trying to figure it all out. It doesn't take having somebody else to explain us. I think every one of us in this room, if I were to say to you, "Do you understand how powerful words are?" that would connect with you. Why? Because we've all had experiences where words hurt us or words built us up. And I think words can be used sometimes as a weapon or as a tool. They can be used as a weapon either in defense. Somebody says something to you that you don't like and you just lash out back at them, or attacking somebody else. Or they can be used as a tool to build up the other person. They're very powerful. There's this ancient writing in the Jewish culture. It's called the Midrash, and it's a collection of rabbis' comments on Scripture. And this is what one rabbi said about this. He says, "The evil tongue slays three: the slanderer, the slandered, and the listener." You see, we only think that it affects the person that we're talking about, right? But he kind of challenges that, and he says, when we speak evil about somebody else, it corrupts our heart. When we speak evil about somebody else, it actually corrupts the person I'm telling this to. And when we speak evil about someone else, it hurts that person as well. I think we all connect with that last one. But consider all of the people your words can affect. Jesus reminds us of the same thing that we just heard from Laura earlier, right? Out of the abundance of a heart will flow speech. What is in our heart will come out in our speech. So here's what I think Jesus and the Proverbs is saying to us today. Your words are a product of your heart. Your words are a product of what is in your heart. When you speak, when you say something, it reveals something about who you are as a person. I mean, have you ever been with somebody, you're just sitting down having breakfast, you order, and you're like, "Yeah, thanks so much for coming here and meeting me. This breakfast looks great." And all of a sudden they just lash out on you, and "Yeah, I hope the waiter doesn't poison my food or spit in it." And you're like, where in the world did that come from? Right? Like, have you ever just been talking to somebody and they completely flip a switch and they change everything about the way that they're talking to you? And whoa, our response is always, where did that come from? Well, it comes out of the abundance of our heart, right? Number one, you could, if you talk to the person a little bit more, you find out that they just got into a fight with their best friend the night before. You say, oh, that's why they lashed out at me at that point. Now it all makes sense. You see, they were upset in their heart. They were bitter in their heart, and it came out through their words. I think this is true in life, because if you lie to somebody, if I lie to a friend, then it almost feels like my world is filled with mistrust. Because I said these words that were untruthful, everything else around me feels untruthful. Because I push people away and I try to be rude as a tool or as a weapon, as a self-defense mechanism, my world ends up lonely. I think this is what the proverb means when it says, those who love using their tongue will eat its fruits. And this is true for life and for death, right? If you're more open and upfront and honest with people, how much more confident will you be? And how much more confident will that person be? But if you try to build people up by encouraging them or helping strengthen them, your world will change. You know, what's funny is yesterday, Darius was, he's playing basketball, and yes, he kills everybody on the court. He got like 8 steals, couple points, couple assists. It was crazy. But you guys already know that, right? Like, he's awesome. But one time when he was stealing the ball, he was actually dribbling down the court, staring at me the whole time. Like, I'm over there, and he's like, I'm like, no, look at the basket, look at the basket, I'm joking. And he's like, oh, right, okay, cool. Because he's so worried, not worried, what's the word I'm looking for? He's so interested in how I view him. It's so important to him how I view him. And because of that, I am so careful to use my words correctly with him. And I tell him how proud I am, whether he gets 2 points, 20 points, or fouls out of the game in 5 minutes. But I want to tell him how proud I am of him, no matter how he does. I want to tell him that he did a good job, even when he messes up. Because I want his world to be shaped knowing that his dad loves him and accepts him. And so to shape his world in that way, I tell him these words. Because I think your world is also a product of your words. God knows how important words are. I mean, was one of the very first story of the Bible, right? God created. How did he create? He spoke the world into existence. He didn't put a tool belt on, get hammer and nails, and get some whatever material you would use to build the earth. I'm not a scientist. I'm not sure what it would be. But he doesn't gather all this stuff up and just start hammering away at stuff, right? He speaks, and the world comes into existence. If you heard the sermon earlier today, Thomas mentioned the story about Jesus being in a boat with his disciples. Jesus could have changed the course of the wind during this great storm on the sea, right? While everybody's freaking out. Jesus knew how important our words are, and he says, be still. He speaks, and the sea stops. God knows exactly how important our words are. Death and life is from the power of the tongue. So it's important how we use them. And as much as I know this is true in my own life, I would love to be able to stand up here and say every time I open my mouth, nothing but life-giving words just spew out of it. But anybody close to me will tell you that this is one of the biggest struggles of my life. Translating what's in my heart to come out in my speech is one of the most difficult things for me to do. Along with that, translating what's in my mind, which is a whole nother story. But it's one of the toughest things for me to do. There have been countless times where I've had conversations with people, and I'll walk away from the conversation, and as I'm walking away, I'll pull out my phone and say, hey, so I actually didn't mean it the way it sounded, I'm sorry, because I'm like reprocessing through this conversation that I had, and I was like, oh, I said this, and they might have taken it that way, that's not what I meant at all. Why? Because I struggle with translating what's in my heart and getting it out in my speech. This is something that I have to constantly work on in my life, and I know every one of us wants to get better at using our words in the best way. So here's a couple pieces of advice for you. For starters, you can use your words to give life to others. I heard this from somebody one point. But this is what the author of Proverbs is saying, right? If the power of life and death is in the tongue, is in our words, well, we want to offer life, right? I mean, when you have the options of giving people life or giving people death, we want to give life-giving words to people. Here's one of the ways that you can do this, just a super practical tip for you. before you speak to somebody, before you tweet something, before you post something on Facebook, before you send out that text, pause for 1 second and ask this question: are my words going to give life to this person? Are my words going to give life to this situation? Some of you guys know this about me, but I try to avoid Facebook at all costs. And one of the reasons that I try to do that is because of all the dumb things people say on Facebook. Like, seriously, we're in Haiti, right? In the second that we get back into some sort of civilization where there's Wi-Fi, a bunch of the guys on the trip were getting on their phones and they were checking Facebook, and one of the guys on the trip was scrolling through and seeing people's comments about the halftime show at the Super Bowl. And people just love to express whatever they want on Facebook because that's what you're supposed to do, right? Everybody in the world is so concerned about your response to the halftime show of the Super Bowl. So you have to post it on Facebook. Well, this person that we were reading, their words and what they said about the halftime show were anything but life-giving to that situation. But what if this person had paused for just a second and asked that question: is what I'm about to say going to give life into this situation? Sure, you can comment on things and you can have frustrations. That's understandable. And it's actually really important to make sure that you have people in your life that you can share those frustrations to. But it's super important who you do that to, the context that you do that to, and how trustworthy that person is. One of the quickest ways to ruin a good friendship is to say the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong person, right? Because then it goes from this person to that person to that person. And in that translation, something gets lost, and boom, friend is lost. So find someone in your life where there is that freedom to express those feelings in a safe way, but also in a life-giving way. Make sure that person is going to offer you words of life into that situation. Not only is it important that you speak life, but that those around you, the people that are closest to you, you say, I can trust this person because I know that their words are life-giving to me. You guys have all heard this saying, right? That the greatest distance to travel is between your heart and your what? Your brain. So 14 inches is the toughest thing to travel, right? Well, I want to suggest to you that there is an even shorter distance that's sometimes even tougher. And that's the translation between your heart and your mouth, or your mind and your mouth. Why? Because the connection between what's in our heart and what's in our mouth is so important and so powerful. Check out Romans 10:9, where it says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. You confess with your mouth and believe in your heart. There's that connection here. These words are so powerful. God understands the power between the connection of the mouth and the heart, so much so that he says, man, when you connect these things, you will be saved. This verse is a great reminder of the power of words. I cannot think of more life-giving words than for you to accept it in your heart and speak it and say, I am putting my trust in what Jesus has done for me. There are no more life-giving words than those. So God understands just how powerful and just how life-giving words can be. So you can use your words to give life to others. You can also use your words to shape the world around you. Just think of a few words briefly in your own life that have completely reshaped the way that you've experienced one morning or your entire life. I know for me, music speaks to me so much. And so if I put on the right song at the right time, then my entire world changes. I can go from being angry, upset, mad about something, and I put the right song on, and I have certain songs that are queued up for those times because I know how important it is. And those words just reshape my world and help me, cause me to look at it a little differently. What about Martin Luther King's speech, right? I have a dream. How much have those words changed our world? Think a little closer, more recent, more at home. What's your guys' response when I say the words, the Broncos win the Super Bowl. Nobody's excited? Oh, you guys were all going for the Patriots? I get it, okay. I know. It's okay. No, but how exciting are those words when you get that first text? The Broncos win, the Broncos win, we're all excited. It changes our world, it reshapes our world. For Broncos fans, you get to enjoy an entire year of saying, we are the Super Bowl champs. How powerful those words can be. For an entire generation, for my generation and some older than me, all I have to say is the words 9/11, or the numbers, right? All I have to say is 9/11, and chills come up our spines. Because we know the impact of those words. And we know exactly what we're talking about, and that translation happens. For me, some of the most powerful words in my life are the words I do. I do. Because it meant that I was committing my life to my wife for the rest of my life. And in those words, there's that translation, there's that understanding of my entire world is about to change. Or somebody coming up to me and saying, I'm pregnant. It was a pretty life-changing world. They reshape the way you view the world. Or when she comes up to you and says, I'm pregnant again. Or when she comes up to you and says, I'm pregnant again, then your world is really shaped. But words can shape our world. So what if you began to approach every time you speak, what if you began to approach your words in this way, understanding how important they are, understanding the impact that they can make, not even just today. But what if you consider this, the next 2, 3, 4 years, for some of you, the next 6 months, are shaped by the words that you say, are shaped by those college letters that you're going to be sending out, are shaped by those conversations that you have with coaches or friends, or teachers or students or parents. Consider the impact of what your words could say in the next 6 months, 6 years. How would that change the way you speak? What would be different if you began to shape your life by the words that you use? I mean, it seems pretty clear to me, it seems pretty clear to all of us, like I said from the beginning, this proverb is nothing new to us, that words have power. What if you began to live out with that power in your life? How much of a difference would that make for everybody that's affected by the words that you say? Let me pray first. Father, even as I'm saying this, I'm reminded that your word is true. And your words are the true life-giving words offered to each one of us. Thank you for the promise that when we confess with our heart and speak in our mouth what you have done for us, that we will be saved. And I ask that in this time, in this reflection time, that we would just pause and ask you, God, what's the one word, what's the one thing that I want to take